Great. Well, thank you all for being with us today. My name is Heather Robidoux, and I would like to welcome you to the Fayetteville Public Library. I'd also like to welcome those watching today from home. Before you leave today, I want just a few things I wanted to mention. If you could, at the end of the program, we have just some feedback forms at the back. If you'd like to share your thoughts or thoughts on programming you would like to see in the future, that really helps us moving forward to know exactly what type of programming our community wants to see. Also, I just wanted to mention a couple of upcoming events. Tomorrow in this room, we're hosting a concert with Ozark Bronze Handbell Ensemble, and they're going to be performing their holiday concert at 3 o'clock. On Monday evening at 6 o'clock, the Hawksbill Winds and the Blossom Winds ensembles from the University of Arkansas will give their end of semester performances here in the Walker Room as well. So if you have time, I hope to welcome you back to the library for those events. With that, I am delighted today to have Farid Noori here with us. He graduated from Middlebury College in Vermont with an undergraduate degree in economics and is currently pursuing his MBA from the Walton College of Business. He is the founder and director at Mountain Bike Afghanistan. Also joining us today is Erin Shane. So please help me welcome them both.
Okay, I understand we can take our mask off when we're up here at the podium, but if anybody would like me to wear my mask, I can certainly do that. So just, no? Okay, excellent. So, well, I'm excited to be here at the Fayetteville Public Library. Again, my name is Aaron Chain, and I'll be one of your guest speakers. I'll do my best throughout the presentation not to use acronyms. If I do, though, however, feel free to interrupt me, stop me, because I want you to understand what it is that we're talking about. But again, I will do my best. So again, acknowledgements. I would just want to say thanks again for the Fayetteville Public Library and Heather for allowing us this opportunity to host this event here with you all. And then also to my colleagues, you can see up there on the screen, you've got Farid, Tosh, Gina, and Bree, and Gordon from left to right. I just want to again thank them for their contributions to make this all happen. And then I want to thank you all for coming and taking the time out of your day to join us here about memories of Afghanistan. So why am I up here? Well, like many of you, I'm from Northwest Arkansas. It's my home, right? I did public schooling, my undergrad and graduate here in Northwest Arkansas. However, I spent a better part of a year in Afghanistan with the U.S. Armed Forces. There's a picture of me in the center there, and I kind of blurred everybody else's faces out. That's just the way that a slide was designed to be, just for privacy. So what you hear from me is my own experiences and observation, while I don't speak for the United States government. That's just my quick caveat there. And I wanted to go back to this slide here and talk about our goal. So the reason why we're here today is to inform Northwest Arkansas about the memory of Afghanistan, the people of Afghanistan, and primarily their culture, and share some of those experiences with you. So that way we may know our neighbors. I don't know how many know, but Northwest Arkansas is going to get about 125 Afghan families that were evacuated from this summer. Canopy is a nonprofit organization that's really leading the charge on this and help integrate those families here in Northwest Arkansas, and they're also using Farid here as a linguist. So our mission as part of our class, the Walton College of Business and our master's program, we started our own little business. It's called Tricycle, and it's an ethical business that we use 100% of the profit of the sales to give those proceeds, 100% of those proceeds, to Canopy to help facilitate the Afghan families. Now, why you may say that, or why you may ask that, is because the United States government is approximately getting $1,500 for the Afghan refugees to resettle in America, and we know that $1,500 doesn't go a long way, especially here in Northwest Arkansas. So we are trying to facilitate that transition with them. So far, we've contributed a decent amount of money, and we're hoping to help increase those contributions. And we'll be selling chai, which is tea. It's a latte made of milk, but it's made from Farid, who is an Afghan himself. So that's kind of our so what, our mission, our purpose for being up here, as a caveat to just trying to share our experiences and help inform you about Afghan culture and the people that you may run across here in Northwest Arkansas. So going back to my slide, so what was I there for? Well, I was there in 2013 in the Khost province, or Khost, which is on the eastern side of Afghanistan. It's mostly an arid environment with mountainous range and also borders Pakistan. So I was there doing stability operations, and what that really means was we were kind of doing nation building. Primarily my job was taking Afghan uniformed police, which you see here, those are their uniforms, and the equivalent of our police force here in America. So the Afghan uniformed police was teaching them basic things on counter improvised explosive devices, so roadside bombs essentially is what they were, and how to identify those. But I didn't want to talk so much about my mission, but some of my interactions and experiences with these great individuals and some of the individuals I interacted here at the bazaar. So I taught about 60 of these guys, in every class, without fail, they would always ask me to wrestle with them. And from like, I just met you, like, this is not something we do in America, right? Like, unless if you're like a young kid or gal, you know, wrestling with your friends. But that's just a cultural thing that they do. They wrestle pretty much daily and just kind of do some grappling. Like, this isn't WWE, WWF. But they would just ask me to wrestle, and I politely declined because that just didn't feel comfortable with that. But if you ever meet an Afghanistan or an Afghan and they ask you to wrestle, don't. It's a normal thing, okay? The other thing I want to talk about was their house structures. The houses that they lived in, vastly different than ours. We are very used to, I would say, masonry construction for the brick fascia that you see in many homes, or a wood, very woodland structures, timber, primarily as the load-bearing source for homes. But they would live in things called klats, which is a house that's made out of dirt and straw, essentially, and it's a very, very solid and sound structure. And they kind of use them as kind of like forts. They almost look like forts, essentially, like a compound, if you will. And that's something that they're going to see vastly different here. We live in our own single-family homes, and they would sometimes share like a compound with multiple families. So again, that's just another cultural difference between Americans and Afghanistan, or Afghans, that you may observe here, and if you run across them, it's probably going to be a little bit of a shock to them. So the next thing, I wish I had a picture of this. I lost a lot of my photos from Afghanistan, but I want to talk about their transportation. So they still use a lot of animal power to get goods from places because of the terrain. Not everybody has vehicles, but those that do have vehicles, they're highly decorated. I mean, highly, highly decorated. We called them jingle trucks, was the slang in the Army, because they just are so decorated with anything from like tassels to like hand-drawn art on them, bells. I mean, and they would stack these things like 3 stories high, as high as they could go. And the only reason I could think of that, you know, which is vastly different from America, you don't see a lot of custom cars out there. You just get them from the lot and you can just kind of use them. But since Afghanistan, from where I was, is very decentralized, and it was kind of like their own form of branding, like logo branding. So you've got like Tyson, right? They've got their very familiar, you know, trucks and their logo. Same thing with JB Hunt. But these jingle trucks would be their own kind of branding, if you will, that you'd be able to identify them from. And that's the best thing that I could correlate with my own experiences. So I want to talk about family real quick. I used to do these things called key leader engagements, or KLEs, with the village elder. And one of the cultural norms is they sit on the ground a lot. They don't really use chairs if they're more traditional. So seeing things like this, and you see an Afghan and offer them a chair, don't be offended if they don't sit down in it. They may be more comfortable just sitting on the floor. Typical hand gestures, try to limit hand gestures with your left hand. Use more of your right hands. Left hand gestures can be seen as offensive. I think another simulation is like the thumbs up for us means like giving somebody the middle finger in Eastern country. That's the kind of correlation that I'm trying to make there. And so another thing with small talk, typically if you're a male speaking with another male or head of the household, it's perfectly fine to talk about sports and whatnot, but depending upon how traditional they are, it may be unacceptable to ask how their wife is doing or how their daughter is doing. That typically is kind of information or conversations held with very close family members, definitely not outsiders. So if you see an Afghan walking down the street, feel free to engage in sports and weather talk, but I would be very careful about your selection of topics when it comes to family dynamics. The last thing, well, there's two other things. One of the things I want to talk about was sense of time. So when I was working with Afghans, I was shocked to know, a lot of them couldn't read. That was in 2013, and I was kind of in a more rural area. So the literacy rate has definitely increased since then, but I was shocked by how many of them couldn't read. And a lot of them didn't even know their own age. And I think I don't know why that is. I could only speculate, but if they don't know their own age, and then time is kind of relative to them because you don't know how old you are. And so it was very common that if we had a meeting, as an American, I would say we're fairly punctual. Sometimes I'm late, but it would not be uncommon for them to be, 15, 20, 30 minutes late. And I think that's just from my own experience, and Farid, you may expand on this. And I think that has to do with time is very relative to them. Not knowing your age, that, everybody in the U.S., I say everybody, most people in the U.S. would know their own age. The last thing I will talk about from my experiences is a lot of the elderly, village elders or senior members of society would dye their hair or beards even with red, I think it's called henna. So that's very common. At first I thought it was just natural kind of like blonding by the sun, because some people that have brown hair, they kind of get blonde highlights. And somebody had to tell me, yeah, that's them dyeing using natural dyes to kind of distinguish them as kind of I don't know, like hierarchy in society kind of form, that they are the village elder, they are an elder or a person of great importance. But here's the picture of coast Afghanistan, pretty much very similar to where I was at. You can see that there's kind of like a bowl outcrop with low-lying lands and then mountainous regions. And that's all I had to share with you. Again, thank you all for coming, and I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker, which is Farid.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for joining our presentation today. And thank you, Aaron, for the super informative cultural comparisons, which I would probably not be able to do because I grew up there, and it wouldn't even cross my mind to share those very important information about how the two cultures might be different. It always takes an outsider to see it. So my presentation today is about my memories in Afghanistan, what I think Afghanistan is, and what it can become in the future. So this image is the Noshakh Peak in northeastern Afghanistan in the province of Badakhshan. The Noshakh Peak is about 24,580 feet. It is among the world's 50 highest peaks, but it's a fact that not a lot of people, or really the world, know about Afghanistan because the focus has been so much on the war and with everything that unfolded this summer. But for me, Afghanistan has always been this incredibly mountainous country, this beautiful country that that I was raised in and what I hope to tell people about. So, growing up in Afghanistan, we were always told this little story of how Japan and Afghanistan got their independence the same day. I don't know if that's true, but that was the narrative. And we would be scolded for, look at where Japan is and where Afghanistan is today. And as I came to the United States 10 years ago, and I enrolled in high school, and then I finished my undergrad university here, actually took some classes on Japan and really tried to understand what went so well with Japan and what didn't. And obviously, the number one thing that sticks is the sense of national identity. Japan is a very unified country, and in Afghanistan, we are highly fragmented. There are different ethnicities, and we had a civil war in the 90s. There's always been a lot of a lot of the problems in modern day Afghanistan have been stirred up by foreign powers, as you know. So I've always wondered, what would an Afghan national identity look like? On the one hand, you have different ethnicities, different languages. It's a very mountainous country, which limits exposure between tribes. So my question has always been, how do you bring a national identity to a country that is geographically isolated, that is ethnically fragmented? And my answer is the mountains itself. Where they have been a source of division, they can actually become an emerging sense of national identity. And I will speak more to what I mean about that. So I was born in central Afghanistan in the province of Ghazni. This is our family farm house where I was born at. You can see solar panels now, but back when I was born, there were no solar panels. This is a modern picture of our house, and it is as rural would get. I have another picture here that's very old, and it's kind of blurry, but there's only another house across from us in this entire village, and that was my father's cousin's house. And we had almond orchards, we had walnuts, we had all kinds of distance farming here. And I think that if you could define what rural is in a picture dictionary, this would be shown, because for kilometers we wouldn't see another family. And in this village, life was very, very peaceful. I had a lot of cousins. I have 4 older siblings, and we didn't have electricity. We didn't have modern technologies. We didn't have a car. My dad had a motorcycle. We would be running these mountains all the time. We would either be looking out for our sheep. We would be making our own trucks and cars, and we would ride bikes all over the place. We would help our grandfather with the farm. And you would never get bored in a place like this. It was just incredible. And this is something that people would do. Is, one of the things is play volleyball. They would take these portable nets and they would go to the next village and be like, we challenge you, like we're gonna have a tournament. And this would happen on, like Aaron was saying, there's the concept of time is very relaxed. Like there's no planning. You would just show up with your team to the next village and ask them, hey, are you down to play volleyball? And so they would erect these nets, and people started watching. This is a picture of like a males tournament, but Afghanistan is still a conservative society, but in our district, there would also be women's tournament, and out in the open, people can watch it. And I think that the most important thing that I think is missing from Afghanistan right now is the ability to be yourself, to enjoy your nature and surroundings. I think that the problems that Afghanistan has faced in the past 5 decades have forced us to be confined, the insecurity has made us unable to leave our villages, to go to the next place. This version of the life that I had in my village is getting lost on us. And I think that in a place like Afghanistan that has experienced a lot of war and conflict, there's a lot of trauma. I ask myself, how can Afghanistan heal as a nation? And I constantly come back to the concept of play, having people come together, forgetting about war, and being out in nature and enjoying each other's company, as a way to heal. And in a place where we've been confined, able to experience other parts of the country, this is vastly, vastly important. So this is where I was born in, and in 1996, when the Taliban first came, my family had to escape Afghanistan and go to Pakistan. So we become refugees. This is my dad, my siblings, and I. We moved to a city in southern Pakistan, escaping the Taliban, and instead of this beautiful ancestral land that we had, we were running into, instead of running those mountains, we were running into walls. All of a sudden, we were in these fortified places where we couldn't play the way we used to back in our village. Life as a refugee was difficult. My father, who's a doctor, had to start all over again. And he started his practice in Pakistan. He didn't speak their language. He didn't have any patience for 6 months. And we had to all of a sudden, you have to leave everything behind. We had to find schools that weren't made for us. Thankfully, the Japanese actually started a school for the refugees, and as more refugees came, we had teachers who could speak our language, and so we started enrolling in the Afghan system, even in exile. And I remember growing up in Pakistan as, obviously I didn't really felt the gravity of what we were experiencing because we always had my siblings and we had fun inside, but we always looked back at what we were missing from our village. And that place has, to this day, remained this ideal place that we all want to return to. But because of the circumstances, have been unable to do that. So it was in Pakistan that I learned to ride a bike in secret. My family was entirely against riding bikes for different purposes. One was obviously safety. In Afghanistan, or in Pakistan too, if you're on a busy road or on any road, it feels like everyone has a right of way, and it's very chaotic. You could get hit by a car instantly. And on that road, there are animals, there are bikes, there are bicyclists, and they've always been against this. But the other reason they were against riding a bike was this concept of, you always had to study. You always had to educate yourself, and anything like a bike, anything like playing sports would be a distraction from education, which, looking back, I understand now because we were living in such terrible conditions that education was the only way to get out of that. That was the rationale. But one day I was standing in line to buy bread for my family, and my friend, who was also standing in line, had brought his bike. And he kept bringing his bike, and I started riding the bike. And I think the day that I was able to ride the bike without his help is probably the closest I can describe the freedom the independence and the personal freedom one can ever experience. And this was important for someone who was living in exile, who is from Afghanistan, where the concept of freedom is really not readily available. So that was a pivotal moment in my life when I learned how to ride a bike in Pakistan, living as a refugee. And I would, whenever I had the opportunity, I would ask my friends to let me borrow their bike and just enjoy and play. And this was this little bit of joy that I had while living dealing with the difficulties of living as a refugee. So after 9/11, my family moved back to Afghanistan. There were millions of Afghans who had fled the first Taliban government, and they came back after 9/11 when the Taliban were removed from power. This is an actual picture of a classroom in my high school in Kabul. What you see there is a hole that was carved by a rocket that hit the classroom during the war. And but as we came back, everything was completely ruined to the ground. The schools had started, either it would be in these types of classrooms where you would still see the rocket shells and things like that, or it would be outside in in these tents. This is a picture, a modern day picture of my school, which got reconstructed, but it was completely reduced to the ground in 2003 when we moved back from Pakistan. But you can still see some of these tents here. I studied in those tents for 2 years as they erected the new building. And it would be, sometimes the teacher would show up, sometimes the teacher was not there, and there would be a blackboard hanging from the ceiling, and it would constantly swing back and forth with the wind. And these are UNICEF tents, UNHCR's children initiative for educating children. One of the things that I did here, a vivid memory, is that so I became the class captain, and I was the person in charge of marking people either present or absent. And I made a truce. I made a deal with several of my classmates who had a bike, and I would say, if you want to miss class today, I will mark you present, but you're going to have to come an hour early with your bike so I can ride it around campus. So I would take this paved road all around the compound, back and forth for like an hour. And I never got discovered by my teachers, but we had this going on. So one of the other things that we did after we returned to Afghanistan after 2003 was we started taking these road trips to my ancestral land in Ghazni in central Afghanistan. We would go every summer. There was security. We would get into my family's Camry wagon, and we would play either English songs or Afghan songs, and we would just roll the windows down. I mean, there was just an aura of peace throughout the country, and we would get there, we would go to the orchards, we would pick mulberries, we would go to the river. Life was back to normal. And we were able to do that until 2006, when the roads started to become unsafe, when the Taliban re-emerged and started abducting students, university students, government employees, military personnel, and ethnic minorities to which I belong. So we stopped going to our ancestral land again, and since 2006, we have not been able to go back there. So this would be the road trip we would take from Kabul to Jawghari in my district. This map shows Afghanistan with the context of the larger South Central Asia, our neighbors Iran and Pakistan to the west and east. And this map here is a topographic map which shows the Himalayan mountain ranges that extend all the way to Afghanistan. And 80%, a fact that constantly gets noticed about Afghanistan is that 80% of the country is mountains. 50% of the population or more live above 6,000 feet of elevation. So it's a highly mountainous country. I think Afghanistan is synonymous with mountains, but it doesn't really get expressed that way in the media. So then in 2011, I came to the United States for high school, and I discovered, it was like rediscovering play. I had all of a sudden the freedom to do everything that I wanted, finding new opportunities to discover myself through play and the United States. So I started hiking. I went to finish my high school in New Mexico. This is a picture in Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. And one of the things that I did in my time in the United States was play tennis. And that was really impactful. The opportunity to step on a court and not have any worries, and you just shut the world. You're inside this small world. The court becomes your world, and you're just playing with the other person. As I did that, it reminded me of Afghanistan, of how the opportunity, of the lack of opportunities that I had grown up as a young person, and how I was growing on the tennis court, how I was making friends, things that was not available to me in Afghanistan. And I started thinking back about, well, we need to have more of these opportunities back home, because really there's so many free hours, at least when I was studying in Afghanistan, in a young Afghan's life, that the school is easy, that you go to school 3 to 4 hours, and then the rest of your day you're sitting unproductive. And play was one of those things that I wanted to create more of, to give people that joy that play brings in everyone's life. And I think play is this universal thing that doesn't disappear with age. How do we feel happy again in a place like Afghanistan? So I left the United States in one of my summer breaks and initiated this project to build Afghanistan's first ever high school tennis court at a girls' high school in Rabi Balkhi. This is a picture of my father, my cousins, who, in my absence, when I came back to the US, finished the court. They'd never built a court. They didn't know what it looked like. We all problem solved. We looked at pictures from Google, and we obviously, it's not a court that you would see in, Florida. It's not fancy. It's not a $50,000 court. It's concrete, but we were able to lay the foundations for this and create this. And in August of 2012, this was completed. So this was my first experience with trying to use sports and play as a vehicle to bring people together, to affect their lives in a positive way. And it became the driving force for me, and is to this day. In the back there is the TV tower. The reason it's called the TV Tower Mountain is because all the TV stations have their antennas up there, and no matter where you are in Kabul, you can find your way back home because you'd be relative to the TV mountain, which is located in the center of the city. So I came back to the United States and I discovered mountain biking in Taos, New Mexico by pure chance. I fell in love with the sport as soon as I descended this mountain. And this is not a picture of that time, but it's a much later picture. But when I was coming down the mountain, there were two things that I was thinking about. One, I've never had this much fun in my life. And two, if this is mountain biking, why is it here in Taos and why is it not in Afghanistan, where we have the world's most enormous mountains? And then so I started working with this idea to how can we use things like cycling and hiking to take more people outside so they can enjoy the same thing that I was enjoying 6,000 miles away from home? How can we take more people out of their troubled valleys to a vantage point where they can see Afghanistan from up above? Because the view you see from there is perspective shifting. Because what you see from there is not what you're grown up with. You see Afghanistan relative to the world at large. You find beauty from there. Afghanistan, to many young Afghans, have become a place without hope, a place that they want to run away from, that they want to go to Europe. In 2015, there were 2 million young Afghans who took the perilous journey overland, going through Iran and Turkey to try to get to Europe, many of whom made it, some of whom died. So how can we, my question was, how can we help people see this country in a different way? That this is not a place that hope is lost in it, that it's a beautiful place that we need to stay and we need to build this country. And for me, the vehicle was cycling, getting more people outside to see Afghanistan in a way that they had never seen before. And that, the more I thought about that, the more this concept of what is our identity as a nation, especially in a place like Afghanistan that has been experiencing conflict for the past 50 years, how can we step away from this? How can we come together as a nation? I think that there are a lot of definitions for country. There's the geographic border, there's the flag. Growing up in Afghanistan, in my experience, we were always given these, poetic definitions of country. Like, country is like your mother. You have to protect your country. But my mother, I've hugged my mother. I know my mother. I will protect my mother every day. But how can you protect something that you haven't really experienced it? In other words, in order for us to protect Afghanistan, we need to know its every nook and its crannies. We need to experience it as you know, I'm failing for words here, but it's rivers, it's mountains. We need to get out there. We need to understand what we are protecting, what it is that we are protecting. And I think that in the end, regimes will change, cultures will evolve over time, people will change, but what will remain of Afghanistan is its geography, is its mountains and rivers. And that is something we need to adopt as a nation, as our true identity, is that we have this place, it's beautiful, and yet we feel like strangers on this land because of the wars. We haven't even been able to experience it. The moment we start to adopt this identity, which means an identity of exploration, it means we will go to the next village, to the next province, and engage with people who are different than us, and start to open up the country to ourselves, to each other, and learn from each other. This has become the cornerstone of my life. I want to dedicate my life to getting more people out of their immediate surroundings, away from their villages, but also above their villages, where they can see from up top what their place looks like. This picture is Shah Foladi Conservation Area. It has a 17,500 feet peak that my friend Boman and Ali Shah here, they were the first Afghans to summit it back in 2018. And the view that they have seen of Afghanistan from up top is a picture of the country that very few of us have ever seen, and also foreigners. So I'm on a mission to get as many more people as possible out there to really reclaim our country, and reclaim it by our physical presence, by being out there and not being afraid of anything, really. So with that said, in 2018, I started the nonprofit Mountain Bike Afghanistan with the goal of using bicycles to get people to go venture out the country. And we operated for 3 years. We organized mountain bike races. We were developing mountain biking as a grassroots movement. And this is a picture of our team after they went for a 4-day bikepacking trip, the first ever, I think, in Afghanistan, to go camp whenever they were tired of riding. They would just, pick up these beautiful spots to camp. And I hired a photographer to go along with them, and the pictures that we received were some of the things that we have never seen of Afghanistan. This was just one trip that my team was able to do, and this is another from during that trip. And unfortunately, as the events in Afghanistan unfolded this summer, this program, there's a mandatory temporary pause on it. We can't really operate the things that we were doing under the Taliban regime, and a lot of these people are on the run, and we're helping them evacuate. But this still remains the idea to break away from all the troubles that has existed in Afghanistan by going out to these beautiful places and exploring it, and encouraging more Afghans and more Afghans. This might feel like a snail's pace change and progress to adopt a new national identity, but I think it's the most sustainable one. It's more powerful than any other form of poetic discourses and trying to get people riled up about their country. It's getting people connected back to the land that will remain after we've all left. Thank you so much for your attention, and we'll take questions and answers. I'll take questions, and we also have chai in the back. As Aaron mentioned, we're all MBA students. We were given a small incentive by the MBA program to go start a business that would do good in the world, and we started this chai-cycle startup, very, very initial stages, and we've been selling chai to give 100% of our proceeds to Canopy, which is doing refugee resettlement in Northwest Arkansas. But as this is our 5th event, and as our project has progressed, it has become more than that. It has become this community engagement of talking about Afghanistan, of sharing these perspectives, like Aaron and myself did today. So I'll be very happy to take questions at the end. Please feel free to treat yourself with a cup of chai. They are $3 a cup. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thanks.
I did want to say one other thing,
Yeah.
custom, that I failed to mention. So I had the opportunity to go to a couple of bazaars. That's like a market where they sell goods, and I would have, we'd always engage in these small talk and eat. We have things in America called finger food, but in Afghanistan they take it to a whole nother level. We had a goat that was killed sacrificed, for a religious event coming up, and I partook in that event, and we had goat with a rice kind of like peel off, and we'd eat with our hands. So you would like take the rice and goat meat, and then you kind of like mold it in your hand, and then you use your thumb to kind of like fork it in your mouth. And they would use like a gravy to like increase the consistency of the rice for you to do that. Like that's like we have finger food in America, but they take it to a whole nother level. So that's something you may also experience if you come across any of these Afghan refugees that are resettling here. Again, they're great people, and I loved working with them. They were very hardworking and motivated individuals, but I did want to add that one caveat in because I totally forgot about it, and I was like, blew my mind when I saw it the first time.
That's incredible. And if if you're curious about Afghans, if you have any questions, if you're anticipating that you might run into them, the refugees who are being resettled here, please ask any question. No question is any question is worth it. No question is, what's the word?
There's no such thing as a stupid question.
Exactly. Yeah. So please ask really anything. Yeah.
Are the Afghans that are coming here, are they some of the ones that were evacuated in the airplanes?
I believe so. I think that there were about 125,000 Afghans who were evacuated, and they are being resettled right now. I think that there will be more evacuation. There's a slower evacuation going on right now with the U.S. evacuating people who have been left behind. But yes, I think that that's a safe assumption.
Are they, do they help the military, the ones that got out? Are they all the ones that were helping the military, or are they just families that, like you, that just want to resettle?
Yeah, I think that it's a mix. There were people who, there was a big, heavy screening in Kabul airport. Obviously, not everyone. It was impossible to get onto these planes, with the goal to bring the people who had helped the U.S. military and USAID and NGOs. But I think that there are people who simply were afraid for their lives and got on the planes. And there are, among these people are artists and people who just felt threatened. Yeah.
And I'll say with our assistance with Canopy, we've had some other people from our MBA cohort kind of sponsor Afghan families. One of them, sponsored a family through the Thanksgiving holiday period and kind of introduced those Afghans into some of the American holidays. Can't really confirm or deny, if they were the specific, worked with American forces or coalition forces, or were they just, did the background check and got through the gates. Can't really confirm or deny that. And additionally, we don't even know the names of some of the families that we're helping out, and pictures are restricted just again for the privacy and confidentiality. So hopefully we answered your question. We tried to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does your family live here now, and did any of your brothers go to school here?
So my family is, out of the U.S. They're in a third country for safety. My siblings, we left Afghanistan one after the other, throughout the past 10 years for education. So we're all over the world, Canada, Germany, and the U.S. I'm the youngest. I came to the U.S. the first, and after that, I think the dam just broke, and everyone else was, we want to do that too. But we were fortunate to get opportunities to come to wherever we did for education. Yes.
What's the timeline for resettlement for the families that are being held through Canopy?
Mm-hmm. I think the refugees first get brought into a camp at their port of entry, which are scattered throughout the U.S., Texas, Virginia, Florida, Wisconsin, and then they get their paperwork done there, their screening done there, and after they're good to go out of the camp, including a lot of health monitoring and things like that, the U.S. government contacts refugee resettlement organizations, and based on, in the beginning, they were asking refugees where they wanted to go, but everyone, obviously, when you're not American, you've only heard of New York and California and maybe Chicago, so they're like, Chicago or California, and they couldn't take everyone, so they stopped asking, and they were just randomly assigning people to these locations. And so Canopy gets notified that you're having 3 more families or 4 more families, and so they have started getting refugees since about a month ago. Half of those, the quota for Northwest Arkansas was 125. Half of them, or more than half of them, are already here, about 70 Afghans who are mostly family. And once they're here, they get about 3 months of assistantship from Canopy, help with rent, food, and as well as paperwork to get them Social Security and employment authorization documents so that they can go get their life set up. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
It did.
Yeah.
It started a month ago. It's still happening now.
Exactly. Yes. I think that there's still more families coming in, and if you know about the way Canopy works, they provide the services that I said, but they also partner with families in the region who become co-sponsors for the incoming families, and the co-sponsors basically take them grocery shopping, basically befriend them to show about the American way of life and just help with their integration. Yeah.
And if we all wanted to help, we could go to Canopy
Yes.
website
Yes.
and check out the stuff.
Exactly.
Super.
Yeah. Any other questions?
You said your dad was a doctor.
Yes.
How did he get patients when you live out in the woods? Or
Oh, that's a very good question. Yes, very good question. So he got his medical degree in Kabul. He was one of the first doctors from the district. And when he was in his 7th year, the communist regime took over the country. They did a coup d'etat. They ousted the president, and my father escaped forced recruitment by the communists. In his final year, went in hiding in southern Afghanistan, and when he came back to finish his studies, the war had just taken over Afghanistan among the communists, because there were 2 main factions. One was loyal to Mao, the other one was loyal to Russia, Lenin, and as a result, these 2 sides were fighting, and my father had just come out of medical school. So he went back to the village. The fighting was all over Afghanistan, and the Mujahideen had just been starting to fight against, to expel the communists. So there were like so many different parties fighting each other. And my dad was given a couple ambulances by a very influential Afghan doctor, a female doctor. And he mostly was helping people who were injured during the war. So he would go, he had this mobile clinic at the back of the van to treat people. And for his personal practice, he had a Honda motorcycle, and he would go all over the villages to looking for patients. And if they needed his help, he would stop there. And whenever the tracks ended, he would park his motorcycle there and just walk to the houses. So he was a true country doctor. And there's a photograph of him on his Honda motorcycle in his Afghan robes, and you would think he's a doctor, but he dressed like an ordinary person on his Honda and had a backpack and would just go all over the district to treat people. Yeah, very good question. I love thinking about. I was never old enough to remember that, but it's definitely something that I would love to do someday, to tour the district like that.
Was he there back home now?
No, he's out of the country. He's not in the U.S., but he's in a third country waiting to hopefully come here one day. He worked for an American health organization that was trying to bring preventative health to the rural areas in Afghanistan, and as the Taliban came, that's when we felt like we needed to leave. So we were actually in Afghanistan during the Mujahideen fights, because my father was working. But when the Taliban came, he himself was threatened because of his association with the American NGO that was promoting public health in the country. So we had to escape and go to Pakistan. Yeah.
Fundraiser. Do you have that available in packages? As in to take home to brew, or?
Yeah, we do not. That's something that we've thought of doing. For today, we just have ready-made chai, which I made right before this event at the library's kitchen downstairs, which is incredible. I loved working there. I think we're so blessed as a community to have this amazing establishment here. So I made the chai down there, but for the future we are thinking we would be happy to, if you're interested in that, we would be happy to take your contact and make something happen for you, hopefully during the holidays. Yeah.
Everybody that we've had several events like Farid's talked to, and everybody says that it's Christmas in a cup. That's what it smells like. Really.
It's really hard to find good chai. It really is. So I think it would be amazing if you had that available so that people could, local people could purchase and then ship to friends and share that with them, share the story.
Yeah, just kind of following back up with our MBA program. So everybody within our cohort of about 50 people, all grouped into teams, did different things, and then we have to do a presentation at the end of this. And then there is a potential where we could get selected for further funding, and that would be something that we're looking to potentially doing. And then, I think our mission statement would be to really, help resettle all refugees from Afghanistan. And then if we want to take this on further, it would just be kind of helping out the next world crisis where help is needed. So I think that would be the next step.
Yeah. But yeah, our a little background on our chai story here. I grew up drinking chai every morning for breakfast. It would be with naan bread, and chai has a lot of spices in it, like cardamom, cinnamon, and when I came to the United States, it was something that I was missing the most. So I started making it, and I started learning about other cultures that make chai, India, and eventually when we were thrown together in this group and incentivized to do this project, we felt like we wanted to give this out to the world. So it's perfectly homemade, with really good ingredients from the co-op, especially the spices, because they, sometimes you can buy spices and they don't smell like anything, but we try to find the best things.
I wonder if you would cover
We wondered if you would maybe cover for like your village or area of Afghanistan, be it, I don't know, within the city of Kabul, but really particularly in your village, about what religion or kind of religious practices in the area?
Yeah, totally. 99% of Afghanistan are Muslim. And within Islam, there are two sects, Shia and Sunni, and about 20% of those are Shia, and the majority are Sunni. And in Afghanistan, there's a significant, so the 1%, which is not super significant, but they're visible in every aspect of life and people know about them, is the Hindu Sikhs and Jewish people in Western Afghanistan. I think that especially this summer when the Taliban were coming back to power, a lot of them, there was these heartbreaking news of most of them leaving the country, finding no place anymore, and they were really, they didn't want, it was their country as much as it is mine, and I think that, whereas for me, like, it's easy, if this regime changes or the rules change, I can easily go back to Afghanistan, but for some of the other people, it's once they leave, we may lose them forever, and that was really, really sad. But yeah, the majority are Muslim. And did you have a question on the head covering as well?
Whatever you want to cover, yeah, we're just...
Yeah, I mean, the Afghans who come here, you might see some of them in scarves. Not really. I don't think that would happen, but it might. Aaron mentioned burqa, but I don't think that would be people who are coming would wear that, but scarves definitely. Yeah.
I will say the other thing, we talked about a little about religion, but I want to talk about language real quick. There's two main forms of language that are spoken in Afghanistan. Dari and Pashto is the English version. Farid, would you like to pronounce it correctly?
No, that you nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Pashto is probably the most common, it is the most commonly spoken language within Afghanistan. But often, in the U.S., we pick up certain accents right along, the English language. Like in down south, we're known for maybe speaking slower or drawing out our A's, right? But you can still understand somebody from New York or Chicago as you can in, somebody from the South in the United States. That is not the case for Afghanistan. Pashto is very regionalized. I had several linguists that I would work with, and some of the linguists that were from up north could not be understood by the people I was training in Coast specifically. So it is very hard to even communicate sometimes within that country, and that's just something I experienced as there in Afghanistan training those Afghans.
Yeah.
But Pashto is the most commonly spoken language, but there are definitely a very wide range of dialects, and it makes it very hard to understand people from, say, the southern province to a province up in the north. Yeah.
Can you talk about the tribes in Afghanistan?
Yeah. So they're tribes and their ethnicities. The four major ethnicities are Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, and Uzbek. And there are actually 35 ethnicities. So there's Aimaq and but these four, I think that they've constantly been thrown in the national mix because they're significantly larger, and they fought the Russians. Each ethnicity had their own Mujahideen warlord fighting the Russians, and when they expelled Russians, they fought each other. And then after 9/11, they were also heavily involved in the politics. But yeah, Afghanistan is very diverse, about 35 ethnicities who speak 35 different languages. But the main ones are Dari and Pashto, as Aaron was saying. And within some ethnicities, there are also tribes. Particularly the Pashtun ethnicity has different tribes in different provinces, and they oftentimes like they kind of live in their own world. Like most people you interact with is from that tribe, and the friendship and the marriages happen within those tribes. Very tribal, but not really. I mean, it's one of the most amazing things about Afghanistan is that even though people haven't been able to travel, like I was saying, and these mountains impose these natural barriers to movement, right? People have always had a radio. And, you know, I remember being in our village, we could tune into BBC Persian and it would always say, or BBC Pashto, it would always say what was happening in different parts of the country. So there is some level of, and today obviously with smartphone, I think that one of the success stories of the past 20 years was media and telecommunication. There were cell towers all across the country and people had access to social media, you know, internet. It was a lot slower, but they had access to information. So hopefully that was helping with the integration of the country, but still pretty fragmented for sure. Yeah.
What's the position of those tribes against the Taliban? Because as I know, tribes.
Yeah.
Why didn't they unite to fight against the Taliban?
Yeah, you know, the National Army, the Afghan National Army had representatives from every ethnicity, were mixed. But I think that if we had to talk about why Afghanistan collapsed, it's a whole other topic. The people are, yeah. Well, so the Taliban come from predominantly, mostly from the Pashtun ethnicity, and within the Taliban, they have a faction that comes from Kandahar and another one that comes from Paktia. And they have, I think that people are, you know, experts are thinking they might have some internal rivalries as well, now that they're in the government. But yeah, the tribes, I think when it comes to the Taliban, people think less about what tribe they are and how we can respond to it. It's more like a bigger threat to everyone, and it affects Pashtuns as much as it affects Hazaras, and who are the minorities both religiously and ethnically. I belong to the Hazaras, and we're one of the most threatened and persecuted ethnicities by the Taliban and extremist groups like them. Yeah. Gina, did you have a question? And we'll take that and then wrap up because it's we are at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, my question was about written language. So, are there as many differences in written word as there are in spoken from region to region?
Very good question. So the two main languages, Dari and Pashto. Dari is the same name as Farsi. So it's a language that's spoken in Iran and Tajikistan. And in Afghanistan, we call it Dari. And written-wise, it's the same. Pashto as well, written, it's the same. But there are dialects. So for people who are educated, obviously, there's this thing, you know, the cosmopolitan version of these languages. And if you're educated, you kind of understand that. I think that, yeah, like written, it's all standard. Verbally, there will be differences from regions. But as soon as you switch to writing and hearing the news, it's all standard, like English. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks so much, guys. Please. Thank you, Heather, for having us here today and wrapping up our project for this semester. Thank you guys for coming.